racing through and giving everyone 30 seconds. I wanted to push all the panel together and do a special mega panel where we're going to go from Queensland and New South Wales, Victoria, all over the shop, right? Let's go around the grounds right now. Robbie Katter is, of course, the leader of Katter's Australia Party. Joining us right now, Holly Hughes is a senator for the Liberal Party representing New South Wales, Gideon Rosner with the IPA, and we save lovely Liz Storer for last, who is, of course, joining us as well in lockdown, as everyone is. Now, Robbie, I want to talk to you about a plan, and I've noticed in local press recently in the north, you would like to see many of those Afghan refugees that are going to be brought back to Australia being sent to regional areas. Why would you like to see that happen?
Well, yeah, I need to clarify that, Paul, and it's not so much that I'd love to see refugees, coming in from all parts of the world, but it's more a case of I'm reading that the government's issuing 3,000 visas.
Correct.
And from my view of the world, I see that these people seem to form clusters in the city where I guess, they're more comfortable mixing with their own. But the key word here is assimilation. And I think a lot of Aussies are welcoming of people, provided they're prepared to prescribe to the Australian values and assimilate. And I think that's always been a challenge. And it's pretty frustrating to me that I can just see how this is going to work out is that they'll be accommodated in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane perhaps. And, at the same time, we're desperate for workers on farms. There's roadhouses and pubs in remote areas that can't get people to move from the coast out there. And as it is at the moment, these people, once they're granted those visas, they're entitled to live wherever they choose. And it shouldn't be like that. If they want to live here, they need to be a provider and fill gaps where we've got it. So the point I'm trying to make is that these people shouldn't be allowed to choose where they want to live. If you're going to allow them in, they should be forced in those areas, and that's like in remote areas of Queensland I represent, where they can be useful and they're much more likely to assimilate.
Yeah, Gideon, how would you feel about that? That obviously when you're coming from a war-torn country like Afghanistan, any part of the Australian map would be awesome to go. But it does always seem that we don't seem to put a huge amount of effort into making sure that you don't end up in the suburban clusters on the outskirts of Sydney or Melbourne.
Yeah, Paul, I've never been a huge fan of these kind of schemes, to be honest. I don't know how enforceable they're going to be. I don't think we should be interfering with anybody's freedom of movement after the year and a half we've had in Australia. Look, what I would rather see is governments focus on making the regions a place that people want to move to, including new migrants. I would like to see governments do more to support regional industry. And I would like to see governments actually do more to help bring in foreign workers to do things like pick fruit. Now, there's been a lot of discussion on your show about why Australians will not go to the regions to pick fruit. Rightly or wrongly, that is the reality. If we want to have cheap fruit and cheap agricultural workers in this country, then we have to get over this coronavirus hysteria and allow in the very, very hard-working foreign workers who do it on the cheap and make it all possible and help all those regional businesses serve their customers and serve the country.
Holly, we know that the NDIS is a scheme close to your heart for the most obvious of reasons when it comes to your family, but also you're fearless in your advocacy. Here's part of what was said today by your good self in the Senate.
We know for every dollar that we spend on it, we exponentially save in the future. In fact, there's some studies that say for every dollar we spend when kids are little, we save $13 throughout their life. But now, in some woke agenda, that listening only to so-called autistic voices is the way to go. Many of these self-declared experts have multiple degrees, jobs, relationships. People that would have been considered Asperger's under the former DSM. But what about those with severe autism, classical autism, those who self-harm, have extreme sensory issues, who are non-verbal, those that cannot be an autistic voice because they cannot speak?
Bloody oath. Well said, mate. This is the thing where classification in and around something like an NDIS is, of course, deeply complicated. But then when you have all the extra layers of complexity, good on you for speaking the way that you did. What are you hoping to achieve here, and who's fiddling with the system?
Look, I think one of the problems we have is we had a change in the DSM when we went from DSM-4 to DSM-5, which is the Diagnostic Statistician Manual for those that don't understand, but it basically removed Asperger's to everyone being classified as autistic. And what that did was it was actually removed the struggles that classically autistic people experienced versus those very high-functioning Asperger's people. Now, what we've got, and we're seeing it everywhere, this kind of woke agenda, this adoption of the authentic autistic voice. Now, I appreciate that. I don't denigrate that. It's fantastic. But a lot of these people were diagnosed in their 40s, 50s, 60s. They've got multiple degrees, they've had families, they've had relationships. These are not people that experienced intensive early intervention, but they are now contributing to the conversation around this. Autism is awesome. And any parent like me that participated in best practice therapy for our classically autistic children, that we were somehow trying to cure them and remove their autism, which is not what we were trying to do at all. We just wanted to give them the opportunity to communicate, to express themselves, to have the best chance of participation in mainstream life. And unfortunately, the NDIA appears to have been taken over by this woke agenda. I've seen it in a number of state-based autism groups. I have been accused by one group of, what's wrong with her? She seems to be so interested in low-functioning autistics. Well, yeah, kind of am. Ooh. And, you know, they all seem to think that they have a high-functioning autistic who would have been classified as Asperger's on their board, so they're covering the diversity. Well, I'm sorry, it's kids like mine and a lot of kids that I know, they don't have that voice. And it's their parents, and let me tell you, we're a little cray-cray, those autism mums. We'll be out there and we're very loud and we don't stop. And the best thing I know about autism mums and autism dads, our biggest thing is paying it forward. So a lot of us have struggled through, a lot of us were pre-NDIS, a lot of us had no assistance. And what we are focused on is making it easier for those families coming behind us. And the NDIA is not doing that at the moment. And the way they are limiting what we need, intensive early intervention, they're claiming you go into an early intervention program, it's somehow removing it from the family. I can tell you that's spoken only by someone who has never raised a classically autistic child.
100%.
It is 24/7.
Yeah, that is outrageous. That really is. Now, Liz, I want to talk about John Cleese, who's got this show, which is about trying to speak to people that have been cancelled. It's all about woke thought. Now, of course, this will ultimately mean that I presume they'll take away all the Lifetime Achievement Awards now. They'll reclassify A Fish Called Wanda as a hate crime here. But basically, don't you love that really the only ones who can either survive cancellation or can call it out are the people who are rich enough to not really care what Twitter thinks?
100%, but thank goodness for guys like John Cleese who are using his platform. He's been anti-woke for ages. I follow him on Twitter. He's been poking holes in cancel culture for many years now, and I can't wait for this show because more than those who have been cancelled, we hear from those semi-regularly, thanks to you guys on Sky, but I want to hear from the other side, and he says he's going to be interviewing both. I want to hear from the other side, going, look at the pain you have visited on this poor conservative or someone who leans right. Why do you think it was worth them losing their job? Why do you think it was worth trashing their reputation? Why do you think it was, okay to drag them through the mud just because they think differently to you? And I want to hear from the left in their own words justifying things like, why did you make it your life goal to make coon cheese, cheer cheese? You know, these kinds of things that the rest of us laugh at. And I hope that John Cleese doesn't make it too funny because, of course, that is his, that's what he's good at. That's what he's awesome at. That's what he's known for. But as much as we can laugh at the ludicrousness of what the left visits on society on a daily basis, what they cancel, who they go after, at the end of the day, these guys are shaping a culture. And so I hope there's that seriousness in this show as well. And also, I hope that there's an Aussie version really quickly on the heels behind this thing.
That'd be one of those formats you'd love them to rip off. But of course, we'll wait and see, won't we? Now, I want to ask you all before you go here about, there's this awful story about the regional council that put down a whole bunch of dogs because, of course, there were COVID protocols that meant that people wouldn't be able to come and adopt them. It's a disgraceful, disgusting thing that's taken place over the past couple of days. Now, you can interpret this question any way you wish. But what is the most over-the-top, under the cover of COVID, most ridiculous thing that you've seen as a rule that you all must abide by? Gideon, I'm sure you could take an hour, but try and give me 30 seconds.
Oh, you're really testing my my memory here, Paul. Look, the thing we're hearing the most about at the IPA is actually the playground. The humble playground and the closure of that has just become so emblematic of the humanity we've lost, the mean-spiritedness of all this, the pointlessness of it. So what sticks out for me is the neighbourhood playground. Could this be the thing that triggers that great rethink we need of all this?
Yeah, I'm with you. Robbie, as a person living in an area that has had bugger all COVID the whole way through, what are some of the rules that just in Mount Isa you go, really? Here?
Well, I think this applied to Mount Isa, but when the lockdowns in Queensland and I was in Brisbane, and I had a family member that was travelled, say, a 50 or 100 Ks, whatever it was, to the boundary, and had some beers, did some fishing, took his son for his 18th birthday, but then had to drive back to the same place next day because they couldn't camp. So they were still essentially in that position for the 2 days.
So ridiculous. Holly, give me the bumper sticker one that just does your head in.
Mate, the lack of compassion, particularly both at the Victorian and the Queensland border. The mother who offered to quarantine so she could look after her grandchildren while her daughter underwent chemotherapy. The dogs are horrific and it's so sad, but I think it is emblematic of the lack of compassion we have seen in destroying families, keeping families apart for absolutely no reason other than political point scoring, where it's Palaszczuk, whereas Chairman Dan, they should hang their head in shame.
Yeah, I'm with you. Liz, you get the last say.
This outdoor mask mandate, doing my head in. We all know outside is the safest place to be. The New South Wales Health Department themselves said a matter of weeks ago there is not one case of outdoor transmission since the beginning of the pandemic, and yet we are stealing part of the joy left down in lockdown life, which is just being outdoors, breathing freely, going to the beach, going to the park. Thank God we can still go to these places as long as it's within 5 Ks. But to mask up, it makes absolutely no sense. This outdoor masking thing does my head in because nobody can show us any proof that it's actually worth a pinch of salt. This kind of thing loses our Premier's credibility. If you're asking us to abide by things that we know are effective and are helping in the fight against COVID, fair enough. But masking up outdoors, somebody show me some science behind this, because
haven't you all read those medical journals about coronavirus being on footballs and if you touch football? Anyway, thank you,